The grand syntactic chamber of Catharos was a place carved from silence and gravity. Monolithic pillars of polished obsidian, veined with filaments of light that pulsed in time with the planet's slow magnetic heartbeat, rose into an artificial nebula that swirled with the captured light of dead stars. Here, in the sanctified core of their empire, the Cathar conclave convened, their chitinous forms arranged in a perfect semicircle around the central dais. The air, heavy with ozone and the scent of ionized thought, did not stir. Sound was a currency spent with miserly precision. For generations, this chamber had been the seat of logic, the crucible where the raw chaos of the galaxy was smelted into the cold, hard certainty of Cathar policy. But today, certainty was a forgotten luxury. Fear, a corrosive and illogical emotion they had long prided themselves on mastering, had seeped through the chamber's shielded walls like a phantom radiation. Prime Syntact Vorlag stood motionless on the dais, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the swirling holographic projection that dominated the space between them. His ceremonial carapace, a lacquered armor of deep indigo, felt less like a symbol of authority and more like a cage. The projection was a map of the Orion Spur, but one sector glowed with a malevolent absence. It was a sphere of perfect non-existence, a wound in spacetime that did not bleed light or energy but simply was not. It absorbed everything, reflected nothing, and its border was as sharp and absolute as a geometric proof. It was expanding, and it was centered on the periphery of the territory claimed by the new species, the soft-skinned, ephemeral bipeds who called themselves humans. "It is a weapon," Executor Krill's voice grated across the chamber, the subvocalizations of his species lending the sound a texture like grinding stone. He was the embodiment of the Cathar military caste, immense, practical, and utterly devoid of nuance. His obsidian armor was unadorned, scarred from campaigns in the Galactic rim. There can be no other conclusion. A null-entropy field of this magnitude, stable and growing, violates every known law of thermodynamics. It is not a natural phenomenon. It is an act of engineering so profound it borders on cosmological vandalism, and the humans are its architects. A low murmur, a dissonant chord of crystalline chimes, rippled through the assembled syntax. It was the sound of consensus fracturing. Vorlag held up a three-fingered hand, and the chamber fell silent once more. He did not look at Krill, but kept his gaze fixed on the horrifying black sphere in the hologram. It was beautiful in its sheer impossibility, a perfect circle of nothing. "Your logic is sound, Executor." Vorlag's voice was a low, resonant hum, the product of a larynx evolved for command in the dense atmosphere of their homeworld. "The evidence points toward artificiality, but to what end? Annihilation, a weapon that erases reality itself. It is inefficient, it is loud in its silence, it announces itself. The humans in all our observations have been anything but overt. They are quiet expansionists, their presence a whisper, not a roar." "A whisper can precede an avalanche," Krill countered, taking a heavy step forward. The floor resonated with the impact. "They have been observed for less than 2 of our cycles. Their technological ascent is a vertical line on our historical charts. They leap from chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in a span of time we would consider the gestation period of a single thought. They are unpredictable. Their psychology is a chaotic storm of contradictions. They form alliances and break them. They build monuments to peace and wage wars of unparalleled ferocity. To assume their ultimate creation would be anything other than the ultimate weapon is a failure of logic." From the other side of the semicircle, a slighter, more elegant figure stirred. Loremaster Thea, her carapace the color of aged ivory and etched with the constellations of their ancestral sky, moved with a fluid grace that belied her age. She was the keeper of their histories, the guardian of their collective memory. "Or it is a failure of imagination, Executor," she said, her voice softer but carrying a different kind of weight. "We have analyzed their communications, their art, their philosophies. The patterns are not of conquest, but of striving. They are obsessed with legacy, with remembrance. They build archives of their own extinct species, digital ghosts they preserve with religious fervor. They send probes bearing messages of greeting into the void, knowing they will not be answered for millennia. They are a species that fears being forgotten more than they fear death. What if this field, is not a weapon to destroy others, but a shield to preserve themselves?" Krill emitted a sharp click of derision. "A shield that annihilates all it touches, a fortress of nothingness. Your poetry is a..." "Appreciated, Loremaster, but it has no place in strategic assessment. The field consumes matter and energy without a trace. Probes sent to its edge cease to exist. Not dismantled, not destroyed. They simply are and then they are not. That is the signature of a weapon designed to inspire absolute terror. It is a declaration. The debate raged on, a slow, methodical collision of fear and philosophy. The Cathar were a species defined by their understanding of the universe's fundamental laws. They had risen to prominence not through brute force alone, but by mastering the elegant mathematics of reality. They built their starships along the curving pathways of spacetime, their cities in harmony with planetary resonance, their society on the bedrock of unassailable logic. The humans defied this. They were messy, emotional, their technology a brute force assault on physics rather than a negotiation with it. Their ships tore through spacetime, leaving turbulent wakes that offended Cathar sensibilities. And now they had done this. They had built a hole in the universe. Vorlag listened, his mind a nexus of the conflicting arguments. He felt the cold pressure of Krill's certainty and the intellectual curiosity of Thea's speculation. But beneath it all, he felt a deeper, more primal dread. The Cathar had a foundational myth, a piece of ancestral terror coded into their very being. They called it the Great Silence. A belief born from the unsettling emptiness of the cosmos, that the galaxy was a hunting ground, and that any civilization that grew too loud, too noticeable, would inevitably attract the attention of predators that slumbered in the dark between the stars. For millennia, the Cathar had built their empire in quiet discretion, their power a guarded secret, their expansion cautious and deliberate. They never broadcast their existence with grand, sweeping gestures. This human creation was the loudest silence imaginable. It was a beacon of impossibility. If the Great Silence was real, if predators lurked in the void, then this human project was a screaming invitation to a feast. Was this their intent, to draw out some ancient foe, or were they the foe themselves, clearing a space for their own incomprehensible purposes? Their fleets are minimal, Thea argued, her holographic display shifting to show known human military assets. The images were underwhelming. A scattered collection of patrol vessels, a few larger carriers. Their designs were functional, blocky, aesthetically primitive compared to the organic, flowing lines of Cathar warships. They invest more in scientific and exploratory vessels. They have made no aggressive moves against any neighboring polity. Their diplomatic posture has been consistently patient. A posture of patience can be a predator's greatest tool, Krill retorted. They watch, they learn, they wait for the moment of absolute advantage. Perhaps this is it. They have achieved a technological supremacy that renders conventional fleets obsolete. Why build warships when you can unmake reality itself? The obsidian pillars seemed to absorb the tension, the air growing colder, denser. Vorlag felt the weight of millions of years of Cathar evolution on his shoulders. His people had survived by being cautious, by never underestimating a potential threat. To be passive now, to wait and see as this sphere of nothingness expanded, felt like a dereliction of his sacred duty. But to act, to launch a preemptive strike against a species they fundamentally did not understand, felt like a reckless gamble with existence itself. An attack on the architects of such a thing could provoke a response beyond their capacity to endure. He raised his hand again, the gesture slow and deliberate. The chamber stilled, every multifaceted eye fixed upon him. The holographic sphere of non-space pulsed silently, a black heart in the center of the room. "We are operating from a deficit of information," Vorlag stated, his voice carrying the finality of a judicial sentence. "Our fear is born of ignorance, and any action taken from such a state is, by definition, illogical. We cannot attack what we do not comprehend. We cannot ignore what so clearly represents a fundamental shift in the galactic balance of power." He paused, letting the implications settle. "Executor Krill, you will place the Grand Fleet on high alert. Position them at the edge of the veiled nebula, masked and ready. But they are to take no action unless directly provoked. Their purpose is deterrence, not aggression." Krill's mandibles tightened, a minute sign of dissent, but he gave a short, sharp bow of assent. The military arm would obey the syntactic head. It was the way of things. "Loremaster Thea," Vorlag continued, turning his gaze to her. "Assemble a first contact package, not of technology or military strength, of philosophy, of art, of our history, our understanding of the cosmos, our fear of the Great Silence. Prepare a message that does not ask, what is this, but why is this? We will attempt to understand the mind that built this anomaly before we pass judgment on its purpose." He took a slow breath, the air rasping in his complex respiratory system. "And I will deliver the message. We will dispatch a single vessel. My own flagship, the logic of consequences. We will approach the human territory. We will hail them, and we will ask. A palpable shockwave of silence followed his words. For the Prime Syntax to place himself at the forefront of such a perilous diplomatic mission was unprecedented. It was a sign of the profound gravity of the situation. Krill's posture straightened, a flicker of respect overriding his aggressive instincts. Thea's ivory carapace seemed to glow with a faint luminescence, a sign of deep intellectual and emotional resonance. Vorlag looked back at the sphere of nothingness. It was a void, an absence, and yet it held all their futures within its perfect, silent boundary. He had made a logical decision, the only one possible. But as his vessel was being prepared, a sliver of something profoundly illogical pierced his disciplined mind. It was a premonition, a cold certainty that whatever the human's answer was, it would be more terrifying and more magnificent than any weapon his people could conceive. They were about to knock on the door of a species that had learned how to edit the universe, and he was not at all certain they were prepared for who, or what, would answer. The logic of consequences was a creation of sublime Cathar engineering, a vessel that did not move through space so much as persuade space to move around it. It was a sliver of obsidian and light, shaped like a stylized cephalopod, its form derived from the perfect mathematics of fluid dynamics. Inside, the bridge was as silent and austere as the conclave chamber. Vorlag stood at its center, encased in the command throne, his consciousness networked directly with the ship's primary systems. He could feel the gentle hum of the singularity drive, taste the faint tang of interstellar hydrogen being sifted by the forward sensors, see the starscape not as points of light, but as a complex tapestry of gravitational and electromagnetic fields. They had traveled for weeks, crossing the buffer zone between their empires, the journey a long, silent meditation. They now hung at the edge of human-controlled space, the distant light of Sol a clinical point in the sensorium. And before them, eclipsing a swath of the Milky Way, was the thing itself. The hologram in the conclave chamber had not done it justice. It was not merely a black circle on a map. It was a physical hole in the fabric of existence. Stars were not blocked by it. They simply ceased to be at its edge. The border was a razor-thin line of absolute transition. On one side, the chaotic, vibrant, energy-filled universe. On the other, a perfect, featureless, silent void. It did not radiate cold. It was the absence of temperature. It did not have a gravitational pull. It was the absence of mass and energy. It was the most profound and unsettling thing Vorlag had ever witnessed. He could feel his crew's disciplined minds recoiling from its presence, their logic circuits straining to categorize something that defied all categories. "They call it the quiet storm," Thea's voice came over the comm, a soft counterpoint to the oppressive silence of the void. She was in her study aboard the ship, sifting through the dregs of human public data streams they had managed to intercept. "The name is a paradox, a contradiction. It is typical of their nomenclature." "Have you found any explanation for its purpose?" Vorlag asked, his own mind brushing against the edge of the field's sensor data, feeling nothing. It was like trying to touch a ghost. "Only poetry and philosophy," Thea replied, a hint of frustration in her tone. "Human networks are filled with speculation. Some believe it is a gateway to another universe, others a monument to their own ambition. There are religious cults that worship it as the coming of a new god, a god of silence. The official government and military channels are completely silent on the subject. There is no technical data, no strategic doctrine, nothing. It simply appeared." Vorlag contemplated this. A project of this scale and the civilization that built it offered no explanation. It was another violation of logic. Power in the Cathar understanding was meant to be displayed, to be understood, to create a stable hierarchy of deterrence. This quiet, unexplained power was destabilizing. It was a threat by its very ambiguity. "We have reached the designated hailing point," the ship's navigation syntax announced, its voice a perfect, uninflected chime. "We are within their outermost sensor range." "Then we shall announce ourselves," Vorlag commanded. "Loremaster Thea, transmit your package. A single open broadcast, unencrypted. Let them see we come with questions, not with weapons." He watched as a stream of data, a cascade of Cathar culture, flowed from his ship into the void. It was a vulnerable act, offering up the soul of their civilization to a potential enemy. For long minutes there was no response. The silence from the human sphere seemed to expand, to press in on the logic of consequences. Vorlag felt the low-frequency hum of his ship's weapon capacitors, still on standby, a comforting vibration against the absolute stillness outside. Krill would be watching from the nebula, his fleet a coiled serpent of destructive potential. Then a signal, It was simple, elegant, and contained no trace of encryption or hostile code. It was a standard universal greeting protocol, followed by a string of coordinates, not for this location, but for a point deep within their territory, a point alarmingly close to the quiet storm itself. "It is an invitation," Thea murmured, her awe palpable. "Or a trap," Vorlag's tactical mind supplied, "to draw us in away from our fleet into their domain." "Their message is plain text," the communication syntax reported. "It says, 'We welcome the Cathar conclave. The questions you ask are best answered with a demonstration. Please follow the provided vector. You have our guarantee of safe passage.'" A guarantee, from a species known for its inconsistent history of promises. It was an illogical proposition. To accept was to place his life, his ship, and the dignity of his entire civilization in the hands of these enigmatic aliens. And yet, to refuse was to return to Catharos with nothing but the same fear and ignorance that had prompted the mission. "Analyze their transmission," Vorlag ordered. "Look for subharmonics, hidden data, any trace of deception." The ship's analytical engines whirred, their crystalline processors glowing with focused light. After a moment, the syntax reported, "The signal is clean. Remarkably so, it is serene. The carrier wave is modulated with a pattern that corresponds to the mathematical constant of pi, extended to 1,000 decimal places. It is a gesture of pure information." Vorlag considered this new piece of data. It was a subtle gesture, but a meaningful one, a shared understanding of the universe's fundamental truths. It was a sign of intelligence, not of aggression. It was a choice point. He could retreat to the safety of Krill's fleet and the cold logic of deterrence, or he could take a leap of faith into the heart of the unknown. The Cathar were not a species given to faith, but they were, above all, a species that craved understanding. "Acknowledge their message," Vorlag said, his decision solidifying. "Inform them we accept their invitation, plot a course to their coordinates, and may the logic of our ancestors guide us." The logic of consequences shifted its orientation, its drive field warping the space around it, and began to move toward the heart of human territory. As they drew closer, the quiet storm grew until it filled their entire forward view, a perfect abyss that seemed to pull at the mind itself. The ship's systems, which had never failed, began to report anomalies. Chronometers fluctuated. Energy sensors registered paradoxical negative readings. The very laws upon which their technology was built seemed to fray at the edges. Yet, through it all, a single, stable navigation beacon from the human coordinates shone like a lighthouse in a sea of ontological chaos. They were met not by a fleet of warships, but by a single, unarmed vessel. It was smaller than Vorlag's flagship, its design a masterpiece of minimalist elegance. It was a long, white, needle-like ship with no visible weapon emplacements, its hull gleaming with a soft, internal luminescence. It pulsed a simple message: "Follow us." The human ship guided them along the very edge of the quiet storm. The journey was unnerving. On one side of the vessel, the universe blazed with nebulae and star clusters. On the other, there was an absolute nothingness that seemed to drink the light and heat from the ship's hull. Vorlag could feel the subtle strain on his ship's structural integrity field, the drive working harder than ever to maintain its cohesion against the bizarre tidal forces of the storm's edge. The human vessel led them to a point on the circumference of the great sphere, and then, without any warning, it turned and plunged directly into it. It vanished from sensors and sight instantly. "They are gone," the tactical syntax chimed, a note of alarm in its synthesized voice. "They have crossed the boundary." Vorlag's 3 hearts beat a heavy, synchronous rhythm. This was the ultimate test. Had they been led to their own destruction? Was this the demonstration that humans could lead them into oblivion? But the beacon still shone, now from inside the storm. "Hold position," Vorlag commanded, his mind racing. Was there a corridor, a safe passage through the null field? It seemed impossible. He reviewed the human message aga. In a demonstration, they had not come this far to turn back. "Follow them," he ordered, the words tasting like ash. "Match their entry vector and velocity exactly. Engage the forward integrity field at maximum projection. If this is the end, let our last act be one of courage, not of cowardice." The logic of consequences surged forward. The boundary of the quiet storm rushed toward them. Vorlag braced himself for non-existence. He closed his eyes, his mind reaching out to the ship, becoming one with it. For a fraction of a second, as the ship's bow crossed the threshold, every system screamed in protest. The universe vanished. There was no light, no gravity, no time, no sound. There was only a profound and overwhelming sense of stillness. But they were not destroyed. They were intact. Vorlag opened his eyes. Outside the viewport there was nothing, not the black of space, but a true philosophical nothing, a canvas without paint. Yet the ship was still there. Its internal lights glowed. The low hum of its systems continued. They were inside the quiet storm, and they were alive. The ship's sensors were useless, reporting only flat, zero readings in every spectrum. But the human beacon was still there, a single point of logic in an illogical reality. They followed it. For how long, it was impossible to say. Time had no meaning here. It could have been seconds or centuries. Then ahead something began to resolve out of the nothingness. It was a light, a soft, golden light that grew steadily brighter. It was not a star nor a planet. It was a structure, a construct of impossible scale and breathtaking beauty. As they drew closer, its form became clear. It was a sphere, vastly larger than any star, its surface a mosaic of continents, oceans, and clouds, all contained within a crystalline shell that shimmered with captured starlight. It was an artificial world, a habitat on a scale that dwarfed any megastructure the Cathar had ever conceived. At its center, a stable, contained star pulsed with the gentle warmth of a G-type sun. This was the source of the beacon. This was the destination. The white human ship was waiting for them, hovering near a massive docking port that opened like the iris of a colossal eye. The port was surrounded by what looked like parks. Green forests, blue lakes, and delicate, architecturally impossible cities that seemed to grow out of the landscape like crystalline formations. A new message arrived, this time with a visual component. The face of a human appeared on the main holographic display. It was a female of the species, her features soft, her eyes a deep, startling blue. She was not wearing a uniform or any armor. She was dressed in simple, flowing gray robes. Her expression was serene. There was no triumph in her eyes, no arrogance, only a profound and patient calm. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova," she said, her voice smooth and perfectly modulated, the Cathar translation flawless. "On behalf of the Terran conquered, welcome, Prime Syntact Vorlag, welcome to Sanctuary." Vorlag stared at the image, his mind struggling to process the flood of new information. The quiet storm was not a weapon that destroyed. It was a shell that protected. It was a shield, just as Thea had speculated. A shield of absolute nothingness, insulating this world, from the rest of the universe. "Sanctuary," he finally managed to transmit, his own voice sounding hollow in his ears. "What is the purpose of this place?" The human Eva smiled faintly. It was a strange expression, one the Cathar had always interpreted as a sign of aggression or deception. But in her, it seemed to convey something else, something akin to understanding. "Its purpose is to endure," she said simply. "They said no one could build it, that the laws of thermodynamics were absolute, that all things must end, that the universe would inevitably decay into a final, cold silence. We found that answer unsatisfying." Vorlag felt a tremor run through his body, a sensation he had not experienced since he was a young hatchling. It was awe, pure, undiluted awe. The sheer, terrifying, magnificent ambition of it all was crashing down on him. The humans had not built a weapon to wage war against other species. They had built a fortress to wage war against entropy itself. They had looked at the inevitable heat-death of the universe, the ultimate fate of all existence, and had quietly, calmly decided to build an ark. The docking clamps of Sanctuary extended, their magnetic fields gently enveloping the logic of consequences. The great iris opened, revealing the vibrant, living world within. Vorlag knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that his civilization, his species, his entire understanding of the cosmos had just been fundamentally and irrevocably changed. They had come expecting to confront a storm of war. Instead, they had found the quietest, most profound act of creation in the history of the galaxy. The interior of San. Sanctuary was a refutation of every hard principle of engineering. Where their designs were austere, efficient, and logical, this place was lush, chaotic, and alive. The logic of consequences was guided into a docking bay that felt more like a terraced garden than a starport. Waterfalls cascaded down walls of living moss, and strange, brightly colored avians flew through the vast, open space, their calls echoing in the warm, humid air. The light was soft and diffuse, emanating from the captive sun at the heart of the sphere, a golden glow that felt ancient and comforting. Vorlag and his honor guard, including Loremaster Thea, descended the ramp. The air was a complex symphony of scents, damp earth, flowering plants, clean water. It was unsettlingly organic. The Cathar preferred sterile, controlled environments. This felt untamed. yet there was an undeniable harmony to it. Ambassador Eva Rostova was waiting for them at the base of the ramp. In person, she was smaller than he had expected, her form fragile compared to the armored bodies of his guards. Yet she stood with an unshakable poise, her blue eyes meeting his multifaceted gaze without a flicker of fear. "Prime Syntact," she said, her voice the same calm tone as her transmission. She gave a slight bow, a gesture of respect they had learned from observing human diplomatic protocols. "Thank you for accepting our invitation. We understand this must be disorienting." "Disorienting is an insufficient term, Ambassador," Vorlag replied, his translator rendering his resonant hum into human speech. "You have created a pocket of reality that operates on principles we believe to be theoretical impossibilities. You have shielded it with a field of absolute null entropy. You refer to it as a sanctuary. We called it a weapon." Eva nodded slowly, her expression one of deep empathy. "We understand why you would think that. Your fear was logical based on the data you had. From the outside, the quiet storm is an absolute boundary. It appears to be an act of cosmic negation, but its purpose is not to destroy what is outside, but to preserve what is inside." They began to walk, moving along a pathway of smooth, gray stone that wound through a forest of towering, alien-looking trees with silver bark. Thea moved beside Vorlag, her multifaceted eyes scanning everything, her mind, he knew, cataloging and analyzing every detail with a scholar's insatiable hunger. "Preserve from what?" Thea asked, her voice filled with a scholar's curiosity. "From other species, from attack." "From time," Eva answered simply. The two words hung in the air, heavy with implication. "From the inevitable grinding decay of the universe, from entropy. Within this shell, the flow of time is managed. The laws of thermodynamics are not violated, but coaxed. The rate of decay is slowed to a near-infinitesimal crawl. 1 billion years outside this shell might be experienced as a single year within. It is a lifeboat, Loremaster, a lifeboat for life itself." Vorlag stopped, the sheer scale of her words striking him with physical force. He turned to face her. "You built this to outlive the universe." "We built it so that something might," she corrected gently. "Not just humanity. We have been collecting genetic codes, cultural data, and living specimens from thousands of worlds. Species that have gone extinct, civilizations that have fallen. We are building a library of life, an archive of the galaxy's memory to carry it past the great twilight." She gestured to the forest around them. "These trees are from a world whose star went nova 1 million years ago. The birds you hear, their species died out on their homeworld long before we achieved spaceflight. We resurrected them from recovered genetic material. Sanctuary is a testament to the idea that nothing should be forgotten." This was the answer to the paradox of human nature that had so confused the Cathar. Their sentimentality, their obsession with the past, their reverence for things that were gone, it was not a weakness. It was the philosophical engine that had driven them to this incredible feat. They were not conquerors. They were librarians. They were curators of existence. "But the cost," Vorlag murmured, his mind grappling with the resources, the energy, the sheer technological mastery required. To create the storm, to stabilize the null entropy field, it would require more energy than 1,000 supernovas. "We did not fight the universe, Prime Syntact," Eva explained, her eyes taking on a distant philosophical light. "That is the mistake so many older species make. They see the cosmos as an adversary, a force to be tamed and conquered. We learned a different lesson. The universe is a song, and its laws are the notes. You do not conquer a song. You learn to harmonize with it." She led them to a clearing, where a vast, tranquil lake reflected the gentle light of the central sun. At the center of the lake, a structure of pure crystal. Any data hummed with a low, resonant frequency. "We did not generate the energy to create the storm," she continued. "We found the universe's resonant frequency, a point of cosmic harmonic balance where space-time and energy can be persuaded to fold in on themselves to create a self-sustaining bubble of null-state reality. It did not take force. It took understanding. It took listening to the silence between the stars instead of just the noise." Vorlag felt the foundations of his worldview cracking. The Cathar had always seen the universe as a grand, logical machine. You learned its rules and you built better, more efficient engines to exploit them. The humans saw it as a piece of music and had learned to play it. The quiet storm was not a feat of engineering. It was a symphony. "And you did this in secret," Thea observed, her voice hushed. "You never announced your intentions. You allowed the galaxy to fear you." "It was necessary," Eva said, her calm expression finally showing a flicker of something somber. A project this delicate could not survive the political and military realities of the galaxy. It would have been seen as a threat or as a resource to be seized. We had to build our harbor in secret, letting the galaxy think we were just another young, aggressive species, not worth serious attention. The perception of us as unpredictable and chaotic was a shield in its own way. It kept the great powers from looking too closely at what we were truly doing. The pieces fell into place in Vorlag's mind. Their erratic history, their minimal fleet, their focus on science, it was all part of a grand, species-wide deception. A multi-generational project to achieve the impossible while the rest of the galaxy was busy with its petty squabbles and territorial disputes. Executor Krill and the Conclave believed you were preparing for a war of conquest, Vorlag confessed. We are, Eva replied, her statement so shocking it momentarily stunned him into silence. She saw his reaction and clarified, her voice soft but firm. But not against you or any other civilization. We are preparing for the war against oblivion. It is the only war that has ever truly mattered, and it is a war no one can win alone. That is why we invited you here, Prime Syntact. She turned to him fully, her hands clasped before her. We have observed your civilization for some time, your logic, your discipline, your deep understanding of cosmic law, but also your great fear, the great silence. You fear the predators in the dark. We do too, but the greatest predator is entropy, the final, unthinking silence that will consume everything. She gestured around her at the impossible world they had built. We offer you a place in sanctuary, not as subjects but as partners. We have the vision, the spark. You have the logic, the rigor, the discipline to help us perfect it, to make it truly eternal. Together, our two species can build a future that outlasts the stars. We can become the galaxy's memory. The offer was staggering. It was not a demand for surrender nor a boast of superiority. It was an invitation to a shared purpose, a purpose so grand it transcended the very notion of empire or dominion. It was an offer of unity based on a shared, fundamental truth, that life is precious and that its preservation is the highest possible calling. Vorlag looked at Thea. Her ivory carapace seemed to shimmer, and he could feel her intellectual and emotional resonance through their subtle biological link. She was in full agreement. This was the culmination of all Cathar philosophy, an answer to the existential dread that had haunted their civilization for eons. Before Vorlag could formulate his reply, a low, melodic chime echoed through the clearing. It was an alert, but it held no panic. Eva tilted her head, a small, almost invisible device behind her ear glowing faintly. Her serene expression tightened just for a moment. "Forgive me," she said. "An anomaly has been detected. It is unusual. Perhaps it would be best if you saw it for yourselves. It relates directly to your great silence." The finality in her tone sent a ripple of cold unease through Vorlag, overriding the awe he had been feeling. The humans, for all their calm, were not a people given to baseless alarms. He and Thea followed Eva to an observatory dome, a structure of transparent crystal that offered an unfiltered view of the interior of Sanctuary, with the captive sun hanging like a jewel in the center. Inside, the room was filled with holographic displays, but they were not showing tactical data or ship movements. They were showing complex waveform analyses, cosmic background radiation charts, and probability matrices. A human scientist, an elderly man with a cascade of white hair, turned as they entered. His face was etched with a mixture of excitement and profound concern. "Ambassador," he said, his voice a low tremor, "we've filtered out all internal energy signatures. All residual radiation from the core star, every quantum fluctuation from the shell itself. We have achieved a perfect silence." "And," Eva prompted. The scientist pointed to a central display. It showed a flat line, the symbol of absolute zero energy. But it was not perfectly flat. A tiny, almost imperceptible wave rippled through it. It was rhythmic. It was complex. It was not random noise. "There's an echo," the scientist whispered, as if afraid to speak too loudly. "A signal. It's not coming from inside Sanctuary, and because of the storm, it cannot be coming from our universe outside." Vorlag stepped closer to the display, his multifaceted eyes trying to parse the data. The Cathar had the most sensitive sensor technology in the galaxy, but they had never detected anything like this. "The quiet storm," Eva explained, her voice barely a whisper now, her previous serenity replaced by an intensity that was far more unnerving. "It insulates us from our own reality. From the background radiation, the gravitational waves, the quantum noise of our own spacetime. We thought it would give us a perfect, sterile environment, a clean slate, but we were wrong. It didn't create silence. It just filtered out the noise of our own universe, allowing us to finally hear something else. Something that was being drowned out. Thea moved to Vorlag's side. "What is it?" she asked. "We don't know," the scientist admitted. "The signal is impossibly ancient. Its structure is non-baryonic. It's imprinted on something that isn't matter or energy as we understand it. It seems to be coming from outside, from a higher dimensional plane, a foundational layer of reality beneath our own." He magnified the waveform. A complex, repeating pattern became visible. It was unmistakably a message, a signal designed and sent by an intelligence. "We have only just begun to decipher it," Eva said, her gaze fixed on the strange, alien pattern. "But the parts we have translated are consistent." Vorlag felt his three hearts grow cold. He leaned in, his mind connecting the final, terrifying pieces. His people had feared predators hiding between the stars. They had looked outward into the darkness of their own galaxy. They had been looking in the wrong direction. "What does it say?" he asked, his voice a dry rasp. Eva turned to face him, her blue eyes reflecting the eerie light of the alien signal. The quiet confidence was gone, replaced by the somber gravity of a truth too large for one species to bear alone. "It's a warning," she said, her voice dropping to a near-inaudible whisper that seemed to shake the very foundations of the room. "It says the great silence you fear is real, but it is not the absence of life. It is the remnant of a harvest. It says that our universe, our entire plane of existence, is young and loud and visible to things that are older and exist in the spaces between realities. It says they listen. And when a universe grows loud enough, when it develops civilizations capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of spacetime, as we have just done, they come to reap." The holographic wave pulsed, a silent, rhythmic heartbeat from an unknown, unknowable source. The warning of an intelligence so ancient it predated their own cosmos. Vorlag looked from the signal to the human ambassador, and then to the vast, beautiful, impossible world they had built around them. The quiet storm. It was not a weapon. It was not just a sanctuary. It was the most sensitive listening post ever created. In their attempt to build a harbor from the gentle decay of time, humanity had inadvertently built a watchtower that allowed them to see the true storm, the one gathering on a horizon far beyond the edge of their own reality. He thought of Krill and his fleet, waiting in the nebula, ready to fight a war against a foe they could see and understand. He thought of his people's long, cautious history, their fear of making a sound. Their fear had been logical. It had also been tragically insufficient. "You did not build a lifeboat," Vorlag said, the words falling from him with the weight of prophecy. "You have built a bell, and you have just rung it." Eva Rostova simply nodded, her expression a mask of grim resolve. The silence in the observatory deepened, no longer the peaceful stillness of a sanctuary, but the heavy, waiting silence before a thunderclap of cosmic, unimaginable scale. The humans had proven the quiet storm could be built. Now together they would have to face the true storm it had revealed. Their shared journey had not ended with this revelation. It had only just begun.